In a quiet village in Nigeria, a little orphan girl carried nothing but an old pouch and a heart full of kindness, but one simple act would turn her life upside down and open doors she never dreamed existed. What she didn't know was that her small gift was more than just a treasure, it was a key that could change her family's fate forever. Evening shadows stretched across a small village in Nigeria, where life often felt heavy for a little girl named Adiz. Her eyes carried the quiet strength of someone who had seen more than her years could hold. She lived with her younger brother and her grandmother in a mud-walled house that leaned as though tired from standing too long. Her parents had passed away when she was still small, leaving her to learn early how to endure loss. Each morning, Adiz rose before the cock crowed, tying a worn scarf around her head before walking barefoot to fetch water from the stream. The path was long, the ground rough, yet she never complained. She carried the clay pot carefully, balancing it on her head with a grace that belied her age. The weight was not just water but also responsibility, the burden of being the one who must keep her small family going. In the village, most people overlooked her. Children her age laughed on their way to school while she watched from a distance, her hands busy with chores. Her grandmother sold small bowls of roasted groundnuts at the roadside, barely enough to feed them. Some evenings they shared a single plate of food, their stomachs rumbling but their hearts bound by love. One afternoon, as the air hung heavy and still, Adiz noticed an old woman seated by the roadside. The woman's wrapper was faded, her feet dusty, her eyes clouded with exhaustion. People walked past her as though she were invisible. Adiz stopped, setting her water pot down gently. She reached into the small raffia purse she carried and pulled out the only piece of yam she had been saving for herself. Without a second thought, she placed it in the woman's trembling hands. The old woman looked up slowly, her lips parting as if to speak, but words seemed too weak to climb out. Tears welled in her eyes. No one had shown her kindness that day, yet this little girl who had almost nothing gave her something. Adiz smiled shyly, lifted her pot again, and continued her walk home, unaware that this single act had stirred something far beyond what she could imagine. That evening, her grandmother asked her why she returned later than usual. Adiz only said she had seen someone who needed food more than she did. The old woman sighed, touched by her granddaughter's heart yet worried that such softness could leave her vulnerable in a world that was often unkind. But somewhere beyond the village's dusty paths, whispers began. An act so small had been noticed in a way Adiz could not yet understand. She had planted a seed, one that would grow in ways no one in her family could predict. Night fell, and as Adiz lay on her thin mat, she stared at the roof patched with palm fronds. She didn't know that her life was about to take a turn that would carry her family from shadows into light. For now, all she knew was the quiet rhythm of crickets and the warmth of her brother curled beside her. The world outside remained the same, but inside her, something had already begun to shift. The morning carried with it the sound of roosters crowing and the distant chatter of women heading to the stream. Adiz stretched her small arms and rose from her mat, brushing off the dust that clung to her wrapper. Her brother still slept beside their grandmother, his tiny chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Adiz stepped outside quietly, feeling the coolness of the damp earth under her feet. She carried the clay pot once again, heading down the narrow path through the trees. The world seemed quiet, yet her mind carried echoes of yesterday, the old woman's wrinkled hands holding her piece of yam, the tears that had filled her eyes. It was only a simple thing Adiz had done, but something about it stayed with her. When she reached the stream, she joined the line of women and girls scooping water. Some of them chatted loudly, some teased one another, but Adiz kept to herself. She lowered her pot into the stream, lifted it carefully, and began the walk home. On her way, she noticed a few villagers glancing at her more than usual. She wondered why but said nothing, her steps steady as always. By the time she reached home, her grandmother was awake, roasting groundnuts in the small fire outside their hut. The smell drifted in the morning air, sharp and earthy. Adiz placed the pot of water down and helped fan the fire. Her grandmother's hands were calloused, her eyes tired, but she still managed a smile at her granddaughter's quiet diligence. Around midday, A stranger arrived in the village. He was dressed in a fine but simple cloth, his walking stick carved with intricate patterns. The villagers gathered to greet him, curious about what had brought him there. Adiz, carrying a basket of groundnuts on her head, paused at the edge of the crowd. The stranger asked for directions to a certain family, but before long, his eyes fell on Adiz. There was something in his gaze that lingered, as if he had seen her before. She felt shy under his stare and lowered her eyes, clutching the basket tighter. The man said nothing, but when he finished his questions, he asked quietly, "Who is that girl?" Her grandmother, who had come forward to see the commotion, answered simply, "She is my granddaughter, Adiz." The man's face softened. He nodded once, as though a piece of a puzzle had fallen into place, and left soon after. The villagers buzzed with curiosity, but Adiz went on with her day, not knowing what weight her small act of kindness had carried. That evening, as she sat with her brother, she told him a short story, the way her mother used to before she passed. She spoke of a bird that carried food across mountains, giving it to others even when its wings were weary. Her brother listened with wide eyes, asking questions that made her laugh. She felt joy in those moments, the kind of joy that came from giving even when life gave her little. Days passed, and the image of the old woman she had helped faded into the background of daily struggles. But then, something unexpected happened. One late afternoon, while Adiz returned from the farm where she had gathered firewood, she found the same old woman sitting near their compound. Her presence startled her. The woman looked cleaner now, her wrapper brighter, her hair neatly tied. "Adiz," the woman called softly, her voice carrying strength this time. "Do you know who I am?" Adiz blinked, unsure how to respond. "You are the woman I gave food to," she said gently. The woman smiled, her face creasing in a way that seemed almost magical. "Yes, child. But I am more than that. I am here because of you." Her grandmother stepped forward cautiously, her eyes narrowing as she studied the visitor. The woman's voice grew firmer. "That day you gave me food, you gave more than a piece of yam. You gave kindness when no one else would. You saw me when others walked by. And because of that, doors will open for you." Adiz's heart pounded. She did not understand what the woman meant. Her grandmother pulled her closer, whispering, "Be careful, my child." But the old woman reached into the folds of her wrapper and pulled out a small leather pouch. She pressed it into Adiz's hand. "Keep this safe," she said. "It is the beginning of something your family has long been waiting for." The pouch was light, almost empty. Adiz frowned, confused, but before she could speak, the old woman turned and walked away into the shadows, leaving the air heavy with mystery. That night, Adiz held the pouch close as she lay on her mat. She could hear her grandmother whispering prayers, asking for protection. Her brother curled beside her, unaware of the weight of the gift. Adiz stared at the faint light of the moon slipping through the cracks in the roof. She could not explain it, but she felt that her life, once ordinary and filled with hardship, had been quietly touched by something far greater than she could yet see. And so she closed her eyes, unaware that the small pouch in her hands carried a fortune of fate waiting to be revealed. The night passed slowly, and the weight of the leather pouch seemed to follow Adiz even in her dreams. She woke before dawn, her hands still curled tightly around it, as though her spirit refused to let it go. She sat up on her mat, her eyes fixed on the small object that now carried more questions than answers. Her grandmother was already awake, bent over the fire as she blew life into the glowing embers to roast groundnuts for the day's trade. The smell of smoke filled the compound. Adiz walked over and placed the pouch beside her grandmother. "Neen, what do you think is inside?" she asked softly. Her grandmother looked at the pouch carefully, almost afraid to touch it. "Child, things like this are not ordinary," she whispered. "It could be a blessing, but blessings can also test a heart. We must be patient." Adiz nodded, though her young mind itched with curiosity. She wanted to open it, to see what treasure it might hold, but her grandmother's warning kept her still. As the day stretched on, Adiz went about her chores. She fetched water, swept the compound, and helped peel cassava for food. Yet, every time her eyes wandered, they fell back on that pouch. She wondered why the old woman had chosen her, a girl who had nothing, to receive something so mysterious. Later in the afternoon, her grandmother asked her to carry a tray of groundnuts to the village square to sell. Adise balanced the tray carefully on her head and made her way there. Children played nearby, their laughter rising into the air. Traders called out their prices, goats bleated, and men gathered under trees to talk. Adise stood quietly by a corner, offering groundnuts to passers-by. Sales were slow, and her stomach growled with hunger, but she didn't complain. Then, as if drawn by fate, the same stranger who had visited the village days earlier appeared again. He noticed her, walked closer, and smiled. "Your name is Adise, isn't it?" he asked. She nodded shyly, clutching her tray tighter. The man studied her face as if trying to read something hidden there. "A woman told me about you," he said, his tone gentle. "She said you gave her food when no one else would." Adise felt her cheeks warm. She wasn't used to people talking about her, especially not for something she thought so small. The man leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Did she give you anything in return?" Adise hesitated, remembering her grandmother's warning. She shifted her weight nervously, then answered, "Yes, she gave me a pouch." The man's eyes widened. He straightened and looked around, as though making sure no one else had heard. "Keep it safe," he whispered. "You don't yet know what you hold, but one day, the whole village will." Before she could ask him what he meant, he walked away, disappearing into the crowd as quickly as he had appeared. When Adise returned home, she found her grandmother waiting anxiously. She told her what the man had said, and her grandmother grew even more cautious. "Child," she said firmly, "you must never show this pouch to anyone else. People's hearts can be dark when envy takes root." That night, Adise lay awake, listening to the chorus of crickets. The pouch rested under her mat, close enough that she could feel its presence. Her thoughts swirled. What if it contained riches, gold, or jewels? What if it was something dangerous? Yet deep down, she sensed it was not about what was inside but about what it represented. Days turned into weeks, and life carried on. Adise continued her daily struggles, but the pouch became a quiet secret between her and her grandmother. Her brother, too young to understand, only knew it as the special bag Adise kept close. Then, one evening, something strange happened. Adise had gone to the stream as usual, carrying her pot. On her way back, she stumbled and nearly fell. The pouch, which she had tied secretly inside her wrapper, slipped out and hit the ground. To her surprise, it opened slightly, and a faint glimmer shone from within. Her breath caught. She knelt quickly, scooped it up, and pressed it tightly to her chest. Her heart raced as she hurried home, afraid someone might have seen. When she reached their hut, she rushed inside and called her grandmother. Together, they sat by the firelight and carefully opened the pouch. Inside, instead of gold or coins, they found a small piece of folded cloth, old yet finely woven, and a carved wooden pendant shaped like a bird. Adise's face fell with confusion. "This is all?" she asked. Her grandmother touched the pendant gently, her eyes widening as though she recognized something. "Child," she whispered, "this is no ordinary thing. This pendant belongs to a story older than you or me. They say whoever holds it carries the key to a destiny that can change generations." Adise listened, her heart pounding with both fear and hope. She had never thought her small act of kindness could lead to something so mysterious. Her grandmother folded the cloth back carefully and returned the items into the pouch. "From this day, Adise, guard this with your life. It may bring us fortune, but fortune can also bring enemies. Remember, it was given to you because of your kindness. Never lose that heart, no matter what comes." Adise nodded, gripping the pouch tightly. She didn't yet understand the weight of her grandmother's words, but she felt a fire stirring inside her, a sense that her life was no longer just about carrying water and roasting groundnuts. Something greater was unfolding, something that tied her little family to a future brighter than the dim light of their hut. That night, sleep came slowly. She held the pouch close, staring into the darkness, wondering what doors it would open, and what storms it might also bring. The morning began with the crowing of the village rooster and the steady hum of women already at the stream. Adiz stirred on her mat, the pouch pressed against her chest as though it had become part of her heartbeat. She had dreamt again of the carved wooden bird, soaring across a sky so wide and endless it frightened her. When she woke, she realized her small hands were still curled protectively around it. Her grandmother noticed. "You hold it even in your sleep," she said softly, her voice carrying both concern and pride. "That is how you know something greater than you has begun." Adiz wanted to ask more, but her grandmother sent her to the farm to gather cassava leaves for soup. Her younger brother trailed behind her, carrying a small woven basket, humming a tune he had made up. The sun hung gently in the sky, and the air smelled of earth and smoke from morning fires. As they reached the farm, Adiz knelt to cut the leaves. Her brother played nearby, chasing insects and laughing. She paused, watching him with a smile, then her eyes fell on the pouch hidden under her wrapper. She thought of the old woman's words, of the stranger's warning, of her grandmother's fear. The weight of the mystery was heavy, yet she was still only a girl who wanted to laugh as freely as her brother did. On their way home, something unusual happened. They passed by the palm grove, and from behind the trees stepped the same old woman. Her wrapper today was brighter than before, her hair wrapped neatly, her back straight, her face calm. It was as if she grew younger each time Adiz saw her. "My child," the woman said, her eyes locking with Adiz, "have you opened the pouch?" Adiz froze, clutching it tighter. She wanted to speak, but her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory, "Never tell anyone." She shook her head slowly. The woman smiled knowingly, as though she could see the truth anyway. "Good. Do not rush to understand it. When the time is right, it will reveal itself. But remember, gifts test the soul. Do not let greed or fear change your heart." Before Adiz could reply, her brother ran forward with innocent excitement. "Mama Ada, who is she?" The woman bent down, touching his cheek gently. "Someone who sees what others overlook." Then, just as quickly as she had appeared, she vanished into the grove, leaving behind only the sound of rustling leaves. Adiz felt her heart race. She wanted to chase after her, to demand answers, but her brother tugged at her hand. "Let's go home. Grandma will worry." That evening, the compound felt unusually quiet. Her grandmother sat by the fire, her eyes fixed on the smoke curling upward. "Did you see her again?" she asked without looking up. Adiz gasped. "How did you know?" "I can feel it," her grandmother said. "She is no ordinary woman. She is tied to our bloodline, though many years and secrets have buried the story. Perhaps she is the one who has returned to complete it." Adiz's skin tingled. "What story?" Her grandmother looked at her intently, the firelight reflecting in her eyes. "Long ago, before I was born, our people believed in a pendant shaped like a bird. They said it carried the promise of freedom and wealth, but only a child pure in heart could awaken its power. Many searched, many failed. It disappeared into the shadows of time, until now." Adiz swallowed hard. "And now it is with me." "Yes, with you," her grandmother said. "That is why you must guard it. That is why kindness must never leave you." That night, Adiz could not sleep. The words her grandmother spoke filled her head, mixing with the woman's warnings. She rose quietly and stepped outside. The night was alive with crickets, frogs croaking from the nearby stream, and the cool breeze brushing her skin. She opened the pouch slowly, her fingers trembling. The carved bird pendant glowed faintly in the moonlight, almost alive. She traced her fingers over its wings, feeling warmth spread through her palm. Then, something remarkable happened. The pendant gave off a soft hum, like the sound of a distant flute. Adiz gasped, nearly dropping it. She clasped it tightly, heart pounding, and whispered, "What are you?" But the pendant gave no answer. It only pulsed once more with gentle light before turning still again. Suddenly, her brother stirred from inside and called for her sleepily. She hurried back, hiding the pendant again, but her hands shook even as she lay back down. She knew now that this was not just a story or an old relic. It was alive. It was waiting for something, perhaps for her. The following days grew stranger. Whenever Adiz carried the pouch, people seemed drawn to her. A trader once gave her extra groundnuts for free, saying, "I don't know why, but something about you makes me want to give." A neighbor who had always been harsh suddenly softened, offering them leftover yam without being asked. Her grandmother noticed the shift and muttered prayers every night. "It has begun," her grandmother whispered one evening, holding Adiz's hand tightly. "The fortune is coming. But with it, trials will come too. You must be strong, my child." Adiz felt torn between fear and wonder. She was only a girl, yet it seemed the weight of an entire story rested on her small shoulders. She looked at her sleeping brother, his face peaceful, his dreams untouched by the world. For him, for her grandmother, she would hold on, no matter how heavy the path became. She closed her eyes with the pouch clutched to her chest once more, unaware that in the darkness of the village, whispers had already begun. Not everyone was happy about Adiz's sudden blessings. Not everyone wished her family well. And soon, those whispers would find their way to her doorstep. The sun rose slowly over the quiet village, painting the clay walls of huts in warm shades of orange. Roosters crowed, goats bleated, and smoke curled up from fires where women prepared the morning meal. Adiz woke with the same heaviness in her chest she had carried for days, the pouch still under her pillow as if it were a part of her. Her grandmother stirred near the fire, humming softly while turning cassava in a pan. Her younger brother ran outside, chasing a hen, his laughter filling the air. Adiz smiled faintly, but her hand moved instinctively to check that the pouch was still where she had hidden it. She felt its outline through the fabric, and her heart steadied. But something was different that morning. Neighbors who usually ignored them began to visit, their faces bright with false kindness. One woman stopped by, offering Adiz's grandmother a calabash of palm oil. Another man, who had once scolded Adiz for playing too close to his compound, now greeted her warmly, asking questions that felt strange. "Your granddaughter has been lucky lately," he said with a forced smile. "I hear even traders favor her. Perhaps she carries more than just groundnuts these days." Adiz's grandmother forced a laugh, but her eyes told another story. She ushered Adiz inside as soon as the visitors left. "Child," she whispered, her voice low, "the whispers are growing louder. People can sense what you carry. They do not yet know what it is, but envy will make them dangerous. From today, you must walk carefully. Speak less. Trust less." Adiz nodded, though the words tightened her chest. She had never been the center of attention, never the girl anyone noticed, and now every step felt heavy under the weight of watching eyes. Later that day, as she carried water from the stream, she overheard two women talking in hushed voices. "They say the girl has something hidden," one murmured. "Something that brings fortune," the other replied. "How else can such a poor child suddenly be favored?" Adiz quickened her steps, her clay pot wobbling dangerously on her head. Her heart raced, but she kept her face calm. She didn't want anyone to see her fear. When she reached home, her grandmother was waiting. She had already packed a small bundle of clothes and some dried food. "Tonight, we leave," she said firmly. Adiz gasped. "Leave the village? But where will we go?" "Wherever the wind carries us," her grandmother said. "Better to wander with safety than to sit in comfort and wait for danger." That night, under the cover of darkness, they slipped out of their hut. Adiz carried her brother on her back, and her grandmother led the way with a lantern dimmed low. The path was silent except for the crunch of dry leaves underfoot. The stars above glittered, but Adiz felt no peace in their glow. She held the pouch tightly against her chest, praying silently for safety. Hours passed as they walked through farmlands and bush paths. The night air grew colder, and her brother stirred sleepily, asking when they would reach home. Adiz soothed him with a soft hum, though she didn't know the answer herself. Just before dawn, they stopped by a thick grove to rest. Her grandmother sank onto a log, her breathing heavy. Adiz set her brother down carefully, covering him with a wrapper. She sat close to her grandmother, who clasped her hand. "My child," her grandmother whispered, "this path will test you more than you can imagine. You must be strong, stronger than I ever was. The pouch is not just fortune, it is responsibility. It will attract both friends and enemies. If ever the day comes when I am not here, you must carry it with courage." Adiz's throat tightened. "Don't say that, Neen. I can't do this without you." Her grandmother smiled faintly. "You already are." Before Adiz could respond, a rustle came from the bushes. She froze, clutching the pouch. From the shadows emerged a group of men. Their eyes glinted with suspicion. "Where are you going with children at this hour?" one demanded. Her grandmother stood quickly, shielding Adiz and her brother. "We are travelers," she said calmly. "We seek only a place to rest." The men exchanged glances. One stepped forward, his gaze falling on Adiz. "That child, she carries something. Hand it over." Adiz's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. She held the pouch tighter under her wrapper, her fingers trembling. Her grandmother's voice rang out, sharp and steady. "You will not touch her." The men laughed, circling them slowly. Adiz's brother began to cry softly, his small hands clutching at her wrapper. She whispered to him, her voice shaking, "Don't cry. I'm here." Just then, the pouch grew warm against her chest. A faint light seeped from it, glowing through the fabric. The men stopped in their tracks, their laughter dying in their throats. Their eyes widened, fear flickering across their faces. "What is that?" one whispered. The pouch pulsed again, brighter this time, and a strange hum filled the grove, low and steady like the beating of a drum. The men backed away slowly, their bravado melting into unease. "This is not ordinary," another muttered. "Let's go before it curses us." Within moments, they melted back into the shadows, leaving only the sound of their hurried footsteps. Adiz collapsed to her knees, her breath ragged. Her grandmother knelt beside her, holding her tightly. "Do you see now?" her grandmother whispered fiercely. "This is no secret you can keep hidden forever. The world will try to take it, but the world also fears it. You must learn to protect it not just with your hands, but with your spirit." Tears filled Adiz's eyes, but she nodded. She held the pouch against her chest, feeling its warmth spread through her. For the first time, she didn't just see it as a burden. She saw it as something alive, something choosing her. As the first rays of dawn touched the grove, Adiz knew that their journey had only begun. She also knew that the whispers of fortune had already awakened forces far beyond her small village, forces that would follow her wherever she went. And yet, deep in her heart, she felt the stirrings of courage. She was no longer just the orphan girl carrying water. She was carrying destiny. The morning after their escape was heavy with silence. The grove where they had spent the night still smelled of damp leaves and earth. Birds sang softly in the trees, but their music did little to ease Adiz's trembling spirit. She sat beside her grandmother, the pouch cradled tightly against her chest, her brother sleeping peacefully with his head on her lap. Her grandmother's eyes were swollen with exhaustion. She reached for Adiz's hand and squeezed it. "Child, what happened last night was only the beginning. That light, it is a shield, but it is also a signal. Wherever we go, it will draw both danger and help. You must learn to know the difference." Adiz swallowed hard, nodding. She didn't feel ready for such responsibility. She was only a girl who once fetched water and roasted cassava leaves. Yet fate had pulled her far from that simple life. As dawn grew brighter, they set out again. The narrow path twisted through tall grass and fields of yam mounds. Adiz's bare feet ached, but she pressed on, carrying her brother when he grew too tired to walk. Her grandmother leaned on a stick, her breathing heavy, but her will strong. They walked until the sun climbed high. Just as Adiz thought she could go no further, they saw smoke rising in the distance. A small village came into view, with huts clustered together and children playing in the open square. Her grandmother hesitated. "We must be careful. Strangers are not always welcomed kindly." Still, hunger gnawed at their bellies. With cautious steps, they entered the village. Women pounding yam paused to stare, and men carrying firewood stopped in their tracks. Whispers rose among them. A stranger in such a tight-knit place was rare, and Adiz could feel every gaze weighing on her. An elderly man, tall and lean, stepped forward. He wore a long wrapper tied at his shoulder and carried a staff. His voice was deep, steady. "Who are you, and why do you wander with children at your side?" Her grandmother bowed slightly. "We are travelers seeking rest. We mean no harm." The man studied them carefully. His eyes lingered on Adiz, narrowing as though he sensed something beneath her quiet gaze. But instead of suspicion, his expression softened. "You may stay," he said finally. "Our village welcomes those who come in peace." Relief washed over Adiz. For the first time in days, she felt the ground beneath her feet was safe. They were given a small hut at the edge of the village, built of mud walls and a thatched roof. It wasn't much, but to Adiz, it felt like a gift. That evening, they joined the villagers around a fire. Stories were told, drums beat softly, and laughter filled the air. Adiz sat quietly, her brother dozing on her lap, the pouch hidden beneath her wrapper. She listened to tales of hunters chasing antelope, of spirits guiding lost travelers, of ancestors who never abandoned their children. The warmth of community touched her heart, though a voice deep inside reminded her not to grow careless. Days turned into weeks, and life in the new village took on a rhythm. Adiz fetched water, helped her grandmother roast groundnuts, and sometimes joined other children in small games. For brief moments, she almost forgot the danger that followed her. But the pouch never let her forget for long. Strange things began to happen. One afternoon, as she washed cassava by the stream, a young boy slipped on the rocks and fell into the water. The current pulled him under, and shouts filled the air. Without thinking, Adiz ran in after him. She grabbed his arm, but the current was strong. In that desperate moment, the pouch pressed against her chest, glowing faintly through her wrapper. A warmth spread through her body, and her strength surged. She pulled the boy out with a force she didn't know she had. The villagers gasped as they pulled them both to shore. The boy coughed water, then clung to his mother who wept with gratitude. People began to whisper again. Some called it a miracle. Others looked at Adiz with suspicion. "She is not ordinary," one villager murmured. "What power lies in her?" Her grandmother warned her that night, "We must not draw too much attention. Help when you must, but guard your secret carefully. Kindness can win hearts, but envy is never far behind." Still, Adiz's heart swelled with something she had never felt before. The pouch was not only a burden, it was also a gift. For the first time, she saw how it could save lives, not just threaten danger. But her joy was short-lived. One evening, as the sky turned dusky and villagers prepared their evening meals, a group of strangers arrived. They carried spears and wore cloths different from the villagers. Their leader, a tall man with sharp eyes, demanded food and shelter. The villagers hesitated, but fear made them obey. The strangers settled among them, their laughter loud, their voices harsh. Adiz kept her distance, clutching the pouch tightly. She felt a chill run through her every time the leader's eyes swept over the crowd. That night, as she helped her grandmother inside their hut, the leader passed by and stopped. His eyes fixed on Adiz, his gaze sharp and unsettling. "You," he said slowly, "what is your name?" Adiz froze. Her grandmother stepped in quickly. "She is just a child. Leave her be." The man smirked but said nothing more. Still, his eyes lingered far too long before he walked away. That night, Adiz could not sleep. She lay on her mat, staring into the darkness, the pouch warm against her chest. She knew the leader had sensed something. She could feel it in the way his eyes pierced her, as though he saw through her silence. Her grandmother whispered in the darkness, "It seems our peace will not last. Be ready, Adise. The pouch is stirring again. It will not let you hide forever." Adise shut her eyes, her heart pounding. She wanted to be a child again, free of secrets and fear. But deep inside, she knew that part of her life was gone forever. The pouch had chosen her, and with it came a destiny she could not run from, no matter how far they wandered. The next day would prove just how true her grandmother's words were. For in the shadows, danger was already plotting, waiting for the right moment to strike. And Adise, though still young, would soon find herself standing at the edge of a choice that could change not only her family's fate but the fate of everyone around her. Night hung heavy over the village. The strangers who had arrived earlier that week sat around their own fire, their laughter too loud, their presence too unsettling. They were not like the villagers, they spoke roughly, moved with the air of men who were used to taking what they wanted. Adise sat inside the hut with her brother curled against her and the pouch clutched to her chest, every sound outside pressing against her heart like a drum. Her grandmother leaned close, whispering so softly that only Adise could hear. "That leader, he saw something in you. We cannot stay here much longer." Adise's throat tightened. "But where will we go? We have walked so far already." Her grandmother's face was weary but firm. "Sometimes the path is not chosen by our feet but by what we carry. Child, do not think we wander aimlessly. The pouch is leading us somewhere, even if we do not yet know where." Before Adise could reply, footsteps crunched outside. Shadows moved across the wall of the hut. Then a voice, low and commanding, spoke. "Open the door." Her grandmother stiffened. She held Adise's hand and shook her head, warning her to stay quiet. But the leader pushed the door open anyway. He stepped in, tall and broad-shouldered, his eyes glinting in the dim light. Two of his men stood behind him, their faces hard. His gaze went straight to Adise. "You," he said, his voice thick with certainty. "What are you hiding?" Adise's hands trembled around the pouch. She tried to keep it hidden beneath her wrapper, but the man stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "There is something about you. Ever since you arrived, the air around you has been different. Tell me, child, what is it?" Her grandmother stepped between them. "She is just a girl. You see shadows where there are none." The man's lips curled into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I know what I feel. Power. And it is not ordinary. If you will not tell me, I will find out myself." He reached forward, but before his hand could touch Adise, the pouch grew hot against her chest. A faint hum filled the air, low and steady. The leader froze, his hand hovering in midair. The men behind him exchanged uneasy glances. Then, without warning, the pouch glowed brightly, light spilling through the cracks of the hut like liquid fire. Adise gasped, clutching it tighter, while her brother whimpered in his sleep. The leader stumbled back, shielding his eyes. "What sorcery is this?" he hissed. Her grandmother's voice rang with strength. "It is not sorcery. It is purity. It is the power of a heart that gives even when it has nothing." The men backed away, muttering. But the leader did not. He glared at Adise, his voice shaking with anger and desire. "I will have it. Whatever it is, I will have it. No child will stand in my way." He stormed out, his men following. Adise collapsed against her grandmother, shaking uncontrollably. "Neen," she whispered, "they will come back. They will not stop." Her grandmother held her tightly. "Then we must be ready. But remember, Adise, this light does not belong to him. It chose you. And it will protect you if you trust it." The night dragged on, filled with tension. Every sound outside felt like footsteps coming for them. Adise barely slept, clutching the pouch until her fingers ached. At dawn, the village stirred with unease. The strangers moved about like hunters circling prey. Villagers whispered among themselves, some fearful, some resentful. A few even looked at Adise with suspicion, as if she had invited this danger upon them. That afternoon, the elder of the village summoned her grandmother. Adiz went with her, her brother clinging to her side. They stood before the elder, who leaned on his staff, his expression grave. "Since you arrived," he said slowly, "peace has left our village. These men came seeking something, and I fear it is tied to you. Tell me, is it true? Do you carry what they seek?" Her grandmother's lips pressed into a thin line. She hesitated, then answered, "What we carry is not a curse, but a gift. Yet envy twists blessings into burdens. If we leave, will your village be safe again?" The elder looked at Adiz with troubled eyes. "Perhaps. But I see something in this child. She carries more than she knows. Still, danger follows her, and my people grow restless." Adiz's chest tightened. She wanted to shout that she had never asked for this, that she only wanted to live in peace. But she remained silent, her hand on the pouch. That night, as they prepared to leave again, her grandmother pulled her aside. "Listen, Adiz. This journey will not end with running. At some point, you must stand. The pouch is not meant to hide forever. It is meant to reveal." Adiz frowned. "Reveal what?" Her grandmother's eyes softened. "The truth of who you are." Before Adiz could speak, voices erupted outside. The strangers had gathered, their leader at the front, spear in hand. "Bring out the girl," he shouted. "Or we will burn this village to the ground." Panic spread among the villagers. Mothers clutched their children, men shouted in fear. The elder tried to calm them, but the leader's voice drowned all reason. Adiz's heart raced. She stepped back, her hands shaking. Her brother cried, clinging to her wrapper. Her grandmother's face was pale but firm. "It is time," she whispered. "Do not fear, my child. The light within you is stronger than the darkness before you." The leader pushed through the crowd, his eyes blazing. He raised his spear and pointed it at Adiz. "Now, girl. Show me what you carry, or your people will pay the price." Silence fell. All eyes turned to her. The fire crackled, goats bleated nervously, and the air was so thick with tension Adiz could barely breathe. She looked at the villagers, some pleading, some glaring with resentment, and then at her grandmother, whose eyes told her to trust. Her small hands trembled as she reached into her wrapper and pulled out the pouch. Gasps rippled through the crowd. She opened it slowly, revealing the carved wooden bird. The moment it touched the air, the pendant glowed brighter than it ever had before, its light spilling like water over the crowd. The leader stumbled back, his spear falling from his hand. The villagers shielded their eyes, their mouths open in shock. The bird's wings seemed to move, fluttering as though alive. A warm wind swept through the square, carrying with it a sound like distant singing. Adiz felt her chest swell, her fear dissolving into something greater, courage. The leader shouted in rage, but his voice was drowned by the hum of the pendant. The light surrounded Adiz, wrapping her in a glow that felt both fierce and gentle. She stood tall, her small frame seeming larger in the brilliance. Her voice rang out, though she didn't know where the strength came from. "This light does not belong to you. It does not belong to envy or greed. It belongs to kindness, to giving even when you have nothing. And it will never bow to darkness." The pendant flared, and the leader screamed, stumbling backward as if struck by invisible force. His men fled in terror, vanishing into the night. The villagers fell to their knees, some in awe, others in fear. When the light finally dimmed, Adiz swayed on her feet, exhausted. Her grandmother caught her, holding her tightly. "You did it," she whispered. "You stood." But Adiz's heart was heavy. She had revealed the secret, and though it had saved them, she knew the journey was far from over. The pouch had shown its power, and now the world beyond their village would not ignore it. As the villagers gathered around, their whispers mixing with cries of wonder, Adiz clutched the pendant to her chest. She had faced her first trial, but deep inside, she felt another truth rising. And so, what began as a simple act of kindness became a light that changed everything. Adi's story reminds us that even the smallest hearts can carry the greatest power. If this tale touched you, subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter of stories that warm the soul. Tell us in the comments which country you're watching from and what time it is where you are. We'd love to connect with you and hear your story too.